How's everybody doing?
Good.
Eating? Feel better? Good. It's funny, every time I go anywhere, people always ask me, like, what's the secret sauce? Like, you interview millionaires, what's the secret sauce? And I'm like, well. So that's actually what we're going to be talking about today. The 3 secrets of millionaires that you can replicate. Sounds really good, right? Let me just say that it's nothing you probably haven't heard before, but the way I set up all my speeches is all about action. Because we can be told everything. Great, it goes in one ear. They're like, yeah, that makes perfect sense, but then we don't actually follow through. Kind of like with the wealth building. It's like, that's a great idea, thanks for giving me the information, I'm going to go buy stuff now. Right? That's not really exactly what we should be doing. So as I go through what these 3 secrets are, I really want to make sure that you have action. So at the end of every one of them, I give you an action item. That's what they do. I'm like, you need to do stuff. So I'm going to ask you guys to commit to just at least one. I know we're all ridiculously busy. So just one. They're not very long. Just pick one thing that you can go away with. Because I know I've sat in on seminars, I've sat in on speeches, and I'm like, oh, that was great. And I take notes in my iPhone, and then I never look at them again. So let's make sure we're actually here listening. I know it's great for networking too, but make sure you're listening for a good reason. So one of the things when I very, very first started was imagine sitting down next to a millionaire and being able to ask them any question you want. Or most of us are business owners, or we care about our wealth. Imagine asking them anything. And then imagine sitting next to 5 millionaires and asking them how they did it in anything. You know, I'm coming up, actually, in 2 weeks, I'm coming up on interviewing 100 millionaires. Kind of insane. And it's really, really interesting to go back through the thousands and thousands of pages of transcripts of how they did it, what they did. It's ridiculously interesting. Like, I'm all excited about this stuff. It's funny, I just signed a book deal with Wiley, so I'm actually going through all those transcripts and condensing everything into a book format, which is kind of crazy, but really, really interesting. I actually am doing a survey, and so I'm going back to the 100 and having them tell me things like, were your parents entrepreneurs? Like, how old were you when you started? Great, do you believe in God? Like, so many weird questions that we never have a chance to ask. I get to ask them. I'm so lucky, you know? And so, like, reading through those answers are really, really interesting. So this is sort of just a piece, a little bit of a taste of what you're going to get. We're going to go over the 3 secrets. And it's funny that you say that, because one of the things that we get all the time, like, I can't be a millionaire, that's crazy. Right? How many here actually believe that? Everyone's like, peer pressure, I'm not raising my hand. Okay, and that's the thank you, and I appreciate that. Even if you kind of think that, sometimes it's our belief in our brain, but we're not really willing to talk about it. Like, this is what we picture as a millionaire, right? A nice house. That house is probably way more than $1 million. The funny thing is, with inflation and everything, $1 million is not what it used to be at all. A lot of the people, which is sad, I really think that we're all going to be millionaires eventually, just with inflation. Woo! I'm a million! My grocery bill this week was 1.2 million. You know? So I think that's sort of the funny thing of changing our way, the way we think about money. $1 million, we should all be trying to get $1 million. By the time I'm the age of 65, I need to have $3 million in the bank if I can retire on 50 grand a year. It's not like it's this huge, it sounds like a huge number. But really, we really need to be setting that as our goal. So good thing you have like little wealth planning sheets so everyone can. So that might be your action item. They can pick that one too, I guess. So the funny thing is that we really all need to be millionaires. It's not even like, yes, I want to make a ton of money right now. It's just setting yourself up for retirement. We have to. So this is my site. I just had it redone, so I'm all proud of it. My story sort of goes like this. I started in corporate America. I actually ended up going to school for computers. I'm a huge geek. And I ended up coming right out of college and making 6 figures, thinking like I was really cool. Like, I traveled around the US as a project manager for a video on demand company, expense account, all that stuff. And I thought, like, on the outside, I should have been happy. Should have, you know, you put on the face of going like, yes, and everybody thinks you're successful. Yay, and I'm young, this is great. And the truth is, I gained like 20 or 30 pounds because of that expense account. I was eating out all the time in my hotel room by myself. You know what I mean? Because what are you going to do? You're in your hotel. They have really good chocolate cake at restaurants. So that's that's what I ended up doing. And I realized I was miserable. I was working 80 hours a week, like supposedly successful, and hating going to work. Like I hated Sundays because it was going to be Monday and I was going to have to go to work. And thankfully, a lot of you guys are entrepreneurs, so you know now you're on a different side. But I didn't realize at that time that there was even an option. Other thing is I made great money, but I was also in $70,000 in debt. You know me, right? And it wasn't like crazy credit card debt or anything like that, but really sort of looking at the situation and going, I can't believe I made these choices, and really being honest with myself of going, okay, I really need to own up to this. So within 16 months, we paid off $70,000 in debt, which was crazy and a totally different story. But that's sort of how this got started. I started a blog about 3 years ago called Eventual Millionaire. Just wanted to talk about how I had a goal to be a millionaire. 6 months after I started that blog, CNN called me. Really cool, right? And I was this close to giving up too. I had talked to my coach right before, and I was like, I don't know if this is worth it. Like, I'm getting some traction. I had like 500 subscribers. I was like, but it's so much time and energy. And I couldn't pull the trigger to tell everybody that I was done. Like, and I'm like, I don't know, I just can't pull the trigger. And then I get an email from CNN. So the funny thing is I was on CNN, the website. They asked me to be on CNN Newsroom. So 2 days later, I was on live with them. And then 2 days after that, I was on Yahoo's homepage. My face was on Yahoo's homepage. I had people from high school going like, oh my gosh, your face is on Yahoo's homepage. Like, I'm so cool now. Like in high school, I was a dork, but now look at me, I'm on Yahoo's homepage. And so it's sort of an amazing thing, and it really set the stage for me to realize what is out there. Like, I'm from Turner, a town of 2,000 people. I have more Facebook followers than people live in my town. So I'm really, really lucky that we live in this day and age. And so after all this stuff, I mean, I was on Yahoo's homepage twice, actually, within 3 months, my face twice. Who knew once, let alone twice? It's amazing what can happen. And I started going, well, what can I do with this? And a great friend of mine was like, you should interview millionaires. I'm like, that's a great idea. Do you know any? Because I don't know any millionaires. And so it sort of started this journey of over 2 years of finding these amazing people with amazing businesses. I've interviewed people like Seth Godin. Have you guys heard of Seth Godin? Great, amazing interview. Tim Ferriss, who wrote the 4-Hour Workweek. I've interviewed some amazing people. I've also interviewed some people that you've never ever heard of, like Craig Wolf, who owns a company called Celebriducks. And he makes rubber ducky celebrities. Right? Like they look like Mr. T. like Marilyn Monroe. But he has a multiple $1 million business based on that. So I've tried to pull from all sorts of walks of life to find out what they actually do. And so that's what I want to talk about. The first secret of millionaires, and it's funny because I can see it in the mirror, like I can see myself talking and everything's backwards, so it doesn't work out well. Is that they have an incredible investing discipline, right? All the wealth planners, yeah, right? Of course, that makes perfect sense. But what I want to say is we're so used to like spending, right? Everybody's worried about spending. Well, I want to differentiate between spending and investing, because I'm not talking about investing in stocks and bonds here at all. Spending is when you pay for goods or services, right? That makes perfect sense. Investing is when you pay for goods and services with the expectation of gain. And that's what we do as business owners, right? We invest in our business hoping more money will come out. Not hoping, you better have a plan for having more money come out. But you want more money to come out, and that's really the point of having your business. Otherwise, it's not really business, it's a hobby. But one of the things that I think a lot of people don't understand is doing that in your personal life too. Kind of like what you were saying, really paying attention to what we're putting our money in and whether it's an investment or not, right? So to me, like coffee, we talk about like, well, don't spend on your latte and then you'll save tons of money. That's one aspect of it, but when I've been interviewing millionaires, it's not necessarily that they're just frugal. And they are, don't get me wrong. Like I have stories of MJ DeMarco, who lived with his mom until he was 26. He's a multi-millionaire now who used to own Limos.com, which he didn't make in the boom. He made this after. Or Frank McKinney, who is an amazing real estate, he calls himself a daredevil entrepreneur, and he drives a Yugo. Actually, he has 2 Yugos. He has his daily driver Yugo and then his purple, formal, nice Yugo. So he doesn't care about cars, so to him that doesn't really matter. Or Dan Nyman, who's a comedian that lives in New York City. And when I was on the interview with him, you know, he lives in a very small apartment because he doesn't really care, he travels a lot. He's like, you know what I think? I think that people should share their barbecue grills. Because really, we don't use them very much. And if we could all get together and share our grills, that would save so much money. And I'm going like, okay, I have my own barbecue grill, I'd like to keep it that way. But I understand where you're coming from, right? So some of them are like extremely frugal, but I think the really important thing, Dan will spend his money on travel because he loves travel, and he has a postage size stamp place. And that's what I want to get at, right? Like I go to Starbucks often. Not necessarily for spending the $5 on the coffee, but because I want wireless internet, right? So that's why it's an investment to me. And in the action item, we'll be talking about what's an investment and what's not. But this is my good friend, Todd Tressiter. He's actually in my mastermind group. He was a guy that I interviewed, and now he's in my mastermind group. Really awesome guy. One of the things he said is the easy way to understand it is that happiness is an internal experience. And anytime you try and satisfy an internal experience with an external thing, you're doomed to failure. And that's sort of the key, right? We want to make sure if there's a magazine on the checkout where you're like, I just want that. That's not what it's about. Our Daredevil guy, he says, he goes, it's every day taking your lunch to work. Right? MJ DeMarco calls it a process, not an event. Like everybody assumes, oh, when you're on CNN, yeah, you made it. I'm like, oh gosh, no. Like I did not. It was not what I expected. I got traffic. It actually made my website go down. I didn't make a ton of cash at all. I didn't actually sell anything on my website. Bad idea. Don't do that. I got a marriage proposal. And I got a lot of people trying to get me into their network marketing companies. But in general, it wasn't, I mean, that wasn't exactly what it is. And I knew that after now getting press, I understand at least more on how to tweak it so it actually is valuable for me. Which is actually the speech that you were talking about. I talked all about how to get press and how to actually use it so it actually helps your bottom line, because otherwise it won't. But dealing with continuous forward motion of going, you know what? Even if something happens, we keep moving forward. We just keep moving forward. And yes, sometimes we're going to backtrack, because that's what happens. We fail, and that's okay. One person that I interviewed, his name is Brig Hart. He says input equals output. And that, I think, is really critical. Right? And sometimes we get scared, so we don't take the necessary actions that we want, but really making sure that those inputs equal that output, that the things that you're putting in are going to give you that end result. And so when we talk about continuous forward motion, think about like the millionaire routine, right? That's what I call it, your millionaire routine. What are those things that you're doing every day that matter? Because we can spend so much time on Facebook, or, you know what I mean? These distractions that don't actually get us to our end result at all. And really making sure you're conscious of what you're focusing on. So the action item that I talk about is what do you know you should be doing but aren't doing? Right? Those things that we like, oh yeah, I should probably be doing that, and then you move on because you don't want to look at that. One of the biggest tips that I can say for you to try and create your millionaire routine is to really think about your, not necessarily just your bottom line, but that investment, right? I like to bring up during this part Richard Branson. Everybody here has probably heard of Richard Branson, right? Who hasn't? He's on my goal to interview. I really want to interview Richard Branson. A billionaire, actually. I'm going to be interviewing a billionaire finally. But one of the things that he said when he was asked about his biggest #1 productivity technique, and you're like, ooh, Richard Branson, like 17 million companies. Like, what is your productivity? And you know, you assume it's a team or something like that. And he said working out. Working out. And that's actually, I mean, I talk to my clients all the time. I make sure they have a workout routine because you are so much more productive as a person if you can really take care of yourself. So maybe that's part of your routine that we're really good at not doing. I am too, believe me. So I do karate now, so they know I have to come all the time, and I can learn a skill. But it's funny, really make sure if sales really pays attention to your bottom line, then what are you doing every single day to be creating those sales? Those are the things we should be focusing on. Okay? And that's what that continuous forward motion is going to get you. So the last is having a no excuses approach. Going back through and listening to the interviews and going through the transcripts, it's amazing. I would say this is the biggest he that there is, which is fun. And I'm not saying that they don't have excuses. I'm not, because we all have excuses. They have excuses, I have excuses, everybody has excuses. But it's not about that, it's moving past them. So having that no excuses approach of going, all right, I recognize that that's an excuse, I'm gonna do it anyway, I can figure it out no matter what. And I interviewed Seth Godin, and I was able to ask him at a different time. It's not in the interview if you listen to. But what he said, because I asked him, like, how do you get past your excuses? He achieves so much. It's amazing what he does. And if you don't know him, you should check him out. He is the #1 marketing blog online with 300,000 subscribers. He actually linked to my site in January. I was like, woo! I know. He emailed his list with a link to my site. Very, very excited about that. But what he said is, when I asked him, like, what do you do to get past it, and how do you deal with the fear that stops you? He said, for what's most important, I strip away the excuses. I'll focus so much energy to the things that I think are important enough. And in other ways, I'll succumb. And he further went on to say, nobody can be Clark Kent. Nobody can be Superman or Clark Kent in our lives. Thankfully, because we're all trying to be superwomen, going, no, I can do it. I can do it. I'll be a martyr. You know, that's not really what it's about. Unfortunately, right? We're really good at that. But really trying to figure out what those things in those specific areas of your life that are the most important, how do we get past our excuses? So what I want to do is go through some no excuses approaches on how they get past them. So the very, very first thing is recognizing them. Because most of the time, I will completely admit I don't, and you probably don't even recognize that you're saying that. Who here says I don't have enough time, I don't have enough money, I don't know how? Those are all excuses, right? And I don't have enough time, that's my thing, right? I work like 25 hours a week, and I'm like, I don't have enough time. Oh, that's an excuse, right? Unfortunately. But knowing that, then I can move past it, right? Now I recognize, I'm like, oh, I said it again. So one of the tips that I'll give you is to, and I've done this and it's not very fun, but you should pick this one because it's really important, even if it's not fun, is to have a good friend of yours call you out every time you have an excuse. Really annoying. Yeah, exactly, really annoying. So I had one of my friends, and I don't have enough time, she's like, and I'm like, ah, oh. And then I'd say something again, and she's like, stop, this is really annoying. But it's really, really potent. Right? So if you don't recognize them, this is one huge way to really have it thrown in your face, even if it's annoying, is to recognize your excuses. Because I'm going to give you some other tips, but you won't be able to use these tips until you can recognize them first. So if you're not there yet, pick that one. The first way, though, to get past it, say you recognize it. You're like, okay, I'm terrified of public speaking, and I'm using whatever excuses I can to not do it. Right? I used to be scared of public speaking. Now I love it, which is sad. It's like, yeah, sweet, I get to stand up and everybody pays attention to me. I have small children who don't pay attention to me. So now I'm excited that people are actually paying attention to me. So one way is to commit way in advance, whatever it is, because a lot of the times fear comes up and you're like, oh, I don't want to do that. But if you go, okay, I think you guys booked this like 9 months ago for me, right? Not that I'm scared of public speaking, but it's one of those things where you're like, okay, 9 months, I don't have to worry about that for a long time. Yes, I'll do it. Yes. And so whatever it is, something that you're putting off in your business that you know you need to do, getting out there, getting out of your comfort zone, book it like a month or 2 out. And be like, all right, yes, I did it, and then sort of back away. And don't worry about it until it's already booked, because then you'll actually do it, because you've really made that commitment. But it's not as scary when you can do it way in advance. Okay, so that's one thing. The other is what I call the worst case scenario. Because what we do in our brains, even if we don't say it out loud, is, oh my gosh, then what's going to happen? Oh my gosh, then this is going to happen. I remember when I was talking about quitting my job, 6-figure job. My husband's a performer. He was a professional juggler at the time. And I was like, I'm going to quit my 6-figure job. My husband's a professional juggler. This seems like a bad idea, right? Now he's doing really well. He has, I should say, he has a theater in Freeport that he just opened called the Theater of Awesome, and they're doing really well. So I can't call him just like a juggler anymore. They're doing really well. But at the time, it was hard. He hates it when I tell this story. But at the time, I was going, I'm going to end up in a van by the river. Like, you know, and that's what our brains do, right? And then so what I do for the worst case scenario is to go, am I really going to end up in a van Number one, I don't even own a van. Exactly. Oh, I'd have to buy a van too. So what we do is think of that, right? What's that worst case scenario? Well, I live with my parents. They'd be okay with me living with them. That's not a big deal. So that probably won't happen. But gosh, I don't want to live with my parents either. So what can I do to do that? And a lot of the time, 17,000 things would have to go wrong in order for me to end up in a van by the river. The chances are so ridiculously slim, but yet that's what my brain sort of went to. And so what I do is I logically counteract it. So I go, okay, if that happens, what do I do? Almost a contingency plan, right? I don't want that to happen. What can I do? And when your logic brain starts to get involved, you're like, oh, okay, all right, that's probably not going to happen. Probability's sake, not going to happen. And therefore, I don't need to worry about that. That's just my initial fear response. And that's what our brains do, and that's okay. But this is one way to sort of get past that. Okay? So if you have one of those excuses, think of the worst case scenario and then backtrack it. The last one is what I call reappraisal. And I really like this one. I don't know if you've ever heard of reappraisal. They use it in therapy and stuff like that a lot too. But I use it as a business coach because it makes all the difference in the world. If you were to have, oh my gosh, I'm terrified of public speaking, or whatever it is in your business, when you think of that and it produces that fear, imagine being a third party. And what I do with my clients is I imagine them, have them imagine being a millionaire already. Someone who knows what they're doing will even necessarily pick maybe one of the millionaires that they really like. And so you go, okay, if I'm terrified of public speaking, well, what would Seth Godin do in this situation? He'd have no issues. He'd be able to make decisions that are really good for his business because that fear isn't there. And to have that third party perspective, to go, in this situation, that makes a lot more sense, and I'm stopping myself because of my own head junk, because we do that really often. But really doing that reappraisal, looking at it as if you were another person, will help you make better decisions in your business. Does that make sense for everyone? We are going to do a bit of a Q&A. I don't know how much time we'll have, but we are going to do a bit of a Q&A afterwards, too, if you have questions at all. So your action item, if you choose to accept it, right? If you haven't been able to recognize your own excuses, that should be the one you're picking for here. But if not, when you start recognizing those excuses, which one are you going to commit to? Which tactic? Commit in advance, worst case scenario, or that reappraisal that I was just talking about? So these are the 3 secrets, right? Probably not something that you haven't heard from Inc. magazine or something like that, but it's really about putting it in your life. Right? I like to say we have a path. This is our journey, right? We can either do the time is going to pass anyway. We can either do the things that are going to take us on the right path, or we can do the things that are easier probably and take us not where we want to be. Right now, every second we can make that decision. And so that's what I want to help you. What actions are we taking to really go down the path that we know we want to go to? So thank you guys.